Friends, enemies, and internet losers, I have returned. Hello, my name is Baroness Cameron, and you're listening to Radio BSC on Podbean.com. Roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll. 10,000 fleets sweep over thee in vain. Man marks the earth with ruin. His control stops with the shore. Upon the watery plain, the wrecks are all thy deed. Nor doth remain a shadow of man's ravage, save his own, when for a moment, like a drop of rain, he sinks into thy depths with a bubbling groan, without a grave, unnailed, uncoffined, and unknown. That's a stanza from Childe Harold's Pilgrimage by Byron, and it paints a pretty fierce picture of the sea. I think the only counter-argument to that would be Ratty's advice to Mole in The Wind in the Willows when he tells him, quote, "There is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats." I'm not much of a boater myself, but I love the songs of the sea and think that Discovery Channel's Deadliest Catch is pretty damn cool. I didn't cry when the ship sank, but I had to stifle a grin when DiCaprio froze to death and sank into the cold embrace of the North Atlantic. Today we're talking about boats and the ocean. Hopefully I won't jinx my guest with constant banter about nautical disaster, but even if I do, it's my show and his problem. I'm Baroness Cameron, and I don't know anything you can't learn with a library card and a curious nature. Let's start the show. Hello and welcome to this, our second episode of Radio BSC. We're talking about the sea and boats today, and we're going to start off with just a little bit of music here. This is Lyle Lovett, possibly one of my favorite songs and possibly one of the best reasons to actually go out and buy a boat. That was Sea Cruise by Frankie Ford. Before that, we had If I Had a Boat by Lyle Lovett. And I said it's one of those songs that makes you want to go out and actually buy a boat. Well, maybe not. My first guest today, I met at a pub here in Vancouver, aptly named for our purposes, the Square Burger Pub. He's a poker player and a drummer, but for today's purposes, he's also one hell of a sailor. He started sailing about 15 years ago in Victoria as part of the Sea Cadet program. Started coaching 5 years later in Alberta, of all places, but I'm sure we'll get back to that. Sure, my one sticking point. He's been involved with sailing in Comox, Kingston, Halifax, Saskatchewan again, Australia, New Zealand, and Alberta. More recently, he's the head coach, or was the head coach for the North Shore Sailing Team in 2008, and he's the current sailing director for the West Vancouver Yacht Club and the program manager for Highburn Sailing Club. Ryan Welguz, hello.
How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm not too bad. A little sunburnt.
Yeah, I was noticing I'm going to have to fix the contrast on the cameras because you're a little bit red. You want to tell us how you managed to get yourself so burnt?
Well, expired sunscreen is definitely not the way to go. The sunscreen was sitting in the back of the car since probably last summer. So I decided to put it on and go, well, I'll just use this because I don't have anything else. And last night we were racing around Bowen, did the annual race around in a 30-foot boat called Killer Rabbit. And about an hour after we got off the water, I started to feel a little bit sore and realized expired sunscreen is not the way to go.
Yeah, that's well, no, I learned that when the last time I was on a boat, I was fishing at a friend's stag party. The only thing I caught was sunstroke.
Sounds about right.
I came off the water, and my knees were just glowing red. So other than sunscreen, what else should we be taking on a boat with us when we go?
Well, I think your basic common sense is a really big thing. A lot of people go out in the water and, it's not illegal to have a couple drinks and whatnot, but just use some common sense.
Now does that apply to operators as well? Because I was on this understanding that if you get caught operating a boat while liquored up, you're in a lot of shit.
That's correct, as long as the operator is sober and not drinking.
Yeah. So that's how you can have like these boat cruises and stuff like that, where everybody's knackered, everybody's out of their mind. But
absolutely, yeah.
But I imagine a situation like that, when you have a boat that's big enough for people to get lost, you want to have more than one sober person on board.
Yes.
Life jackets, one for everybody?
Absolutely.
Is there sort of a minimum age for children? Because I can imagine probably the worst thing than not having a life jacket would be one that didn't fit properly, that sort of didn't...
It's funny you mentioned that because it's a very common occurrence down on the boat. Skippers have, 5 or 6 life jackets, depending on how many people on board. But the Coast Guard go to board their boat, and they go, okay, yeah, you've got 6 life jackets and 5 passengers. Awesome. That's great. Do they fit?
Yeah.
That's the next question. And that's a very subject that most people don't even wear life jackets. You look at the jet skis around the area. It's very, very common for people not to, and I wonder why.
Well, I mean, I guess the other thing, because if you're talking about sort of impaired driving, I mean, I guess the life jacket would be a seatbelt. Drunk driving is drunk driving, but what about speed?
Speed. Well, unfortunately, the waterway is a little bit different, and there's no posted speed limits unless you're inside the harbor with your signs up saying this is the posted speed limit. There's really no posted speed limit.
But I mean, what are you talking about? Like an actual harbor? Because, like, for instance, would Burrard Inlet count as a harbor? Or are you talking sort of like, when you actually get into a marina or something?
When you actually get into a marina, we have a little bit different area here in English Bay. Obviously, we've got the shipping channels and stuff like that. The only real difference that we have out here is you can't have any sails in between Lionsgate Bridge and Second Narrows. No sails between the bridges. Okay. You have to motor out.
Well, most bigger launches have motors on them, don't they?
They all have motors on them. You have to. It's actually a regulation by Government Canada to have an engine on board.
Did not know that. There you go. So how often do these regattas take place? Because the only one that I remember, I mean, this wasn't necessarily a regatta, but the Vic Maui is one that some friends of mine used to race in all the time.
Yes, Vic Maui is every other year, and in between Vic Maui is Van Isle, and that's the race around Vancouver Island.
So circumnavigate.
Yeah, circumnavigate Vancouver Island, yeah.
What's that like? Is there any sort of nasty places around going around Vancouver? I mean, I imagine the west coast of Vancouver Island might be a bit touchy sometimes, but
it really depends. I guess everywhere can be a bit nasty here and there. A couple 2003, I went through one of the nastiest places in the ocean, and it was flat, calm, totally cool.
Well, where would you rather be on a really bad day, in a channel or out at sea?
I guess that's tough. I would have to say probably out at sea.
Really?
You get the channels very narrow. You get your waves that are a lot shorter together, so your boat just up and down, up and down, up and down. If you get a long, nice, even wave stretch, you're perfectly fine. You know.
Because I boat from time to time, and basically for me, boating just means not catching fish. But speaking of circumnavigation, we're just going to. The song we're coming next, a song by the Evaporators. I don't know if you've ever seen the Evaporators play, but they've been going on. They've been going on for about 20 years now. Well, more than 20 years now, because last year was their 20th anniversary. But going to the Evaporators is also going to like a Canadian history lesson, because Nardwuar, the songs themselves, as you'll see from listening to this one, but also in between he gives the little introductions, and it's basically it's great because you go to these all ages shows and these kids are actually learning more than they did at school that week at 1 hour of an Evaporators show. But the song is called St. Rock, which is the boat that's at the Vancouver Maritime Museum, the A-frame at Vanier Park. It's an RCMP boat that was the second boat to circumnavigate, to go through the Northwest Passage. But it went from west to east, whereas I think Larson, or whoever the first guy who did it went east to west.
Around, yeah.
And it's also the first boat to circumnavigate North America.
Oh, wow. That I did not know.
Yeah, so it was basically went around to Panama Canal and then back up. So this is a song by the Evaporators called St. Rock. And as I said, you can go see it at the Maritime Museum in Vancouver. Following that up, I mean, I realized it is not boating, but it's a band called the Surf Messiahs, a little bit of surf music, because you can surf on the water. And then we're going to finish that set off with a band called the Smugglers, who they are actually very nautical, but not in the way that you think. Like, they appear on stage in like pea coats and toques, like they're sort of the sailor hoodlums playing West Coast sort of garage surf. And also their logo is the SS Nardwuar. And the song we're going to listen to is excuse me. The album's called The Smugglers at Marineland, so I figure that qualifies it as well.
Classic.
But also it is a classic song. It's called Vancouver, BC. And there's a bit of a movement that basically people want it to be the official Olympic theme song. Won't happen, but we can just keep trying. So this will be the Evaporators with St. Rock, Hungarian Sheriff by the Surf Messiahs, and the Smugglers with Vancouver, BC. And I said these are all local Vancouver bands, so I give them a listen. That was the Smugglers with Vancouver, BC. Before that, as I said, we had the Surf Messiahs with Hungarian Sheriff and the Evaporators with St. Rock. We were talking about the Vic Maui, and apparently you said you had something that you wanted to add to that about some local guys that you know they're running the race right now, or?
Yeah, we've got some local guys from the West Vancouver Yacht Club right now. The Vic Maui race is on. You can follow them you can Google Vic Maui race. It'll pop up and follow them along. And currently in, I think, 6th place.
Okay, so you raced around Bowen yesterday.
Yes.
Right now, the Vic Maui is going.
Yes.
Now, something that I sort of giggled at the first time that you and I talked about it was the idea of sailing in the prairies. Because I mean, it's a West Coast thing that, you have the mountains, you have the oceans, the whole 9 yards. But I always figured that to be sailing, you needed an ocean.
Well,
but you don't.
You're thinking, where am I sailing? some of the lakes on the prairies are absolutely fantastic because there's no current, there's no tide, flat water, and the wind just howls right across it. So the ability to learn to sail is very easy to do. There is some of the best sailors in the world are actually prairie sailors, and I don't mean prairie as in Canada prairie sailors, but lake sailors. Okay. And the simple fact is the wind swirls around a lake as you kind of see it's a puddle, and the wind will swirl around the trees, the land, and to be able to read the wind is very important, and the shifts back and forth. So because they have practice doing it in their climate, they can go anywhere and they can see the wind shifts right away. Somewhere like the ocean, the winds don't shift that often. They don't swirl around things. Somewhere around Bowen Island, you'll get a shore breeze, but for the most part, they don't shift, and they're pretty constant and pretty steady. And if it's a shift, you're talking like 60 degrees, huge shift.
As I said before, I've never actually been on a sailboat. I haven't, but I've been on a few sort of recreational boats. I mean, not really sailboats or recreational boats as well, but just sort of like motorboats. But if I'm on my motorboat and you're on your sailboat and we're meeting each other, what do we do?
What do you mean?
Like, for instance, road to the rules type. I mean, how does, because I know that when you're racing and also when you're both on sail, whoever has the wind coming in, was it their port side?
The starboard side.
Starboard side has the right of way or has to yield?
They have the right of way.
Okay. So how does it work with boats that are under wind power and boats that are under their own power? Is there an actual,
It's very simple. The motor vessel has to give way to the sailing vessel, unless you're talking commercial freighters and things that need to stay in the channel so they don't get grounded.
Yeah, because we were talking about that before we started. I had the actual ruling here. Was it vessels less than 20 meters in length, including sailing vessels, must stay out of the way of larger vessels that can safely navigate only within the channel. A large vessel will remind you of the requirement to give way by giving 5 or more short blasts of its horn. This means the situation has escalated to an emergency and you must take all necessary steps to get out of the way. And that was it here, Queen of Cowichan, August 12th, 1985. And that's when the sailboat, apparently they were below deck and they weren't listening or they were asleep or something, just sort of floated in the path and the ferry just went right over top of it and killed all 3 of them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so in an emergency situation like that, if because you're saying that, all, like worst case scenario, I mean, it'd be unfair to throw this on, but worst case scenario, you have no wind for your sails, your motor's screwed, and there's a boat bearing down on you. What the hell do you just...
In that sense, you have to actually fly a flag stating no steerage, that your vessel is an emergency. You have to make multiple sound blasts. Your sails have to be down, and hopefully you can grab the attention and be able to fix it. Otherwise, jump off.
Yeah. So for a sound blast, I guess like you have a horn or just like a klaxon or...
No, in the Canada regulations, you have to carry a sound signaling device, whether it be a whistle, an air canister.
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh at the whistle. I just pictured some poor schmuck on the front of his boat whistling like a little referee's whistle with a BC ferry bearing down on it. But I mean, like an air horn.
Yeah, you have an air horn.
Like the annoying people at hockey games.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. The other thing too is now most boaters will carry a VHF radio. Mm-hmm. You can access the BC ferries on the VHF radio, and if there's a really big issue, you can let BC ferries know and hopefully avoid a disaster.
Because it sounds as though, it's the typical thing. As soon as you make something idiot-proof, someone invents a new idiot. But it's, unless you're looking at sort of actual catastrophic failure, it seems that there's enough things in place that if you, as you said, common sense, that if you do actually realize that the rules are there for a purpose and the regulations are there for a purpose, it's kind of difficult to get yourself into that much trouble.
It really is, yeah. It's sometimes some events, the most prepared people can have all the gear and everything ready. But the other thing that happens, they don't know how to use the gear.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to common sense. Practice your gear, learn how to use it. If you don't know how to use it, figure it out.
Yeah.
If it's
well, it was like you said with the Coast Guard, you have enough life jackets, but do they fit?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for you that has still sort of a safety thing. It might not be one you can answer, but just from somebody who's sailing, and also the fact that you're qualified to instruct instructors.
Yes.
What do you think was going through the mind of the captain of the ferry when its steering gave out and it basically just started plowing into Sewell? First of all, his first thought was, God, I hope there's nobody down there. But what could you possibly do in a situation like that other than decide that it's probably better to plow into the boats than just to plow into the dock?
Yeah, and that's a very tough question. I think going through his mind was a number of different things in a split second. Do I barrel into the ferry or into the ferry terminal and kill people, or do I barrel into boats and just cause that disaster and hopefully not kill somebody? Yeah. Obviously, he took the what he thought was right. He actually got accommodations for it.
Probably not from the owners of the boats in
No.
Sewell.
But he was trying to minimize, maybe not necessarily damage, but people.
Well, I mean, I think when you look at it this way, I mean, there's passengers. I mean, it would probably be easier for people to get the hell out of the way of a ferry in that marina than it would be for like causing a panic for the waiting rooms and the people in the... Well, I mean, the cars aren't that close, so they don't have to worry that much about it, but in the waiting rooms and stuff like that. And also insurance. I mean, the boat owners would have insurance.
Absolutely.
And the damage that would be done to the dock and done to the ferry would have been just ridiculous if you hit it pretty much, not at speed, but he was,
He was going at a good clip. He was going enough to crush pretty much the whole marina.
I'm sure I know people who have boats in there, and I feel bad for laughing. But just watching that tape on the news that day, he's like, "Hey, Bob, you have a boat at Sewell's, don't you?"
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, enough of making fun of. Well, actually, no, we're not enough of making fun because you were just talking about racing around Bowens. This one's kind of appropriate. It's another local band called the Dreadnoughts, and this song is about taking a sailing trip to Bowen Island and being attacked by a giant squid. But then having a prostitute from the Balmoral save them. And I love the title of this song, even though it takes about an hour to read. This is the Dreadnoughts, and the song is Mary, the one-eyed prostitute who fought the colossal squid and saved us from certain death on the high seas. God rest her one-eyed soul. And then we're going to follow that one up with another sort of pirate tune. It'll be the Town Pants with Monahan the Mutineer. But right now, this is the Dreadnoughts with Mary, the one-eyed prostitute who fought the colossal squid and saved us from certain death in the high seas. God rest her one-eyed soul. That was Monahan the Mutineer by the Town Pants. Before that, I can't believe I'm reading this again. Before that, we had the Dreadnoughts with Mary, the one-eyed prostitute who fought the colossal squid and saved us from certain death in the high seas. God rest her one-eyed soul. Okay, so the question I was going to ask you before but didn't, that I didn't prep you for, has to do with, you do instructing, so you teach kids and stuff like that, or have. But, like, what exactly does it take to get into sailing as opposed to, say, boating? And the question I have for you, this is not meant to be an ambush thing, but, they joke about the shortest books in the world. One of them is Poor Yachtsman I've Known. Can you sail on a budget, or do you actually have to have some coin to be able to sail?
That's a common misconception, actually. You don't have to have a lot of money to sail. Buying the boat, that's not the issue. You can get a small little boat for $20,000 and, have your weekend sails and away you go. The big thing comes to the maintenance. That's your big cost. Mm-hmm. But you don't need a lot of money to get into the boating industry. To take a course, for example, the kids that I teach, anywhere from 4 to 18, and then a different course, 18 to 90-year-olds I've taught, works out to about $10 an hour.
Well, can you rent sloops? Like, can you rent little boats and take them out if you just want to go for a little, if you want to just go puttering around?
You can, if you have the right papers to say that you can rent the boat out. But Cooper's Boating does that a lot. And there's a number of other boating agencies that you can rent a boat out and away you go.
Well, maybe I'll get a list from you and we'll throw it up on the blog so we can... So people can check it out if they want to go go punting. I was going to ask you something else, but I completely forgot what it was. Your worst day ever on the water. And I know that some people say that any day fishing is better than a bad day doing anything else, or a good day doing something else. But your worst sailing day ever.
That's a good one. I've got a couple. I'll tell you this one. I was out in Kingston, Ontario in 2002 racing for nationals. It was bright blue sky, Lake Ontario, flat, absolutely gorgeous. It was awesome.
I've seen that. I've been to Kingston once, but I've seen that lake change in the matter of blinking an eye.
So you can see where this is going. It's about 7 knots, about 15 kilometers an hour, and we're racing along. Everything's awesome. It's great. I turn around and look behind me, and I see this black cloud. Like, I mean, blacker than your shirt, like just this black cloud. And I said to my crew, pull the sails down. This is not going to be pretty. Where there's about 80 boats on the water racing. And all of a sudden, a 40-knot wind squall came through, 9-foot swells. So from the base of the wave to the top of the waves, 9 feet. And I watched 60 boats flop over and lightning hit. And I don't know if you realize, but all the masts are aluminum or carbon.
Well, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that open body of water when lightning's coming down.
So you're running around with a lightning rod. And we all had to flip our boats upside down. The ones that survived the wind squall came through still had to flip their boats upside down and sit under it because the fiberglass is safe. But obviously the aluminum sticking up in the air is not. That's
funny. It seems so contrary, though, because when you watch, I mean, as I said, I know very little to nothing about sailing, but I guess it also depends on where you are, because, I mean, you know, most of the things that I see or hear, you want to stay out of the water. But, I mean, in this situation, it was actually safer for you to be, you know, under a capsized boat.
Underneath, because it creates that pocket of air, and you want to be the smallest thing on the water, and you've got other boats that are bigger and trees and stuff like that, and you're trying to be smaller than them. So it's safer.
It's like when you're being chased by you and your buddy being chased by a bear. You don't have to outrun the bear; you just have to outrun your buddy.
So, exactly.
Okay. Likewise, best day on the water.
Best day on the water. Funny enough, racing in Saskatchewan, and I won regionals. And bullets all the way across. Bullets are zeros across the board, so first place every race, and take the trophy. It was a good day.
There you go. Any last words of wisdom to pass on to the gracious viewer?
I think I would more just have to say, you know, it's in our backyard. Everybody's going to do it. Go ahead, go have fun, enjoy, use your common sense.
Well, I think the fact that you sort of pointed out that you can sail not from Vancouver to Halifax, but, you know, you can sail Halifax East, Vancouver West, and all spots in between.
Absolutely. So. And it's you know, it's a great passion of mine, and anybody that does it is a passion of theirs. But for people getting into it, get your driver's license on the water, and it's called the PCOC card, Pleasure Craft Operators Card, and the Power Squadron puts those courses on all the time, and be safe on the water.
Well, actually, just one last thing before we just popped in my head. You started with the Sea Cadets.
Yes, I did.
Do you recommend that, or do you just put your kids in sailing, or just go out and do it, or do you find that like an organization along those lines is a better way to do it, or you can just you can build a campfire without being a Cub Scout, that sort of?
Absolutely. I guess I'm a little biased on this point, but I think the cadet program is absolutely phenomenal. You not only get the sailing side of things, but you get so much more out of it, discipline, and everything else like that.
And we all know how sailors need discipline.
Well, that's time for another show. But no, I highly recommend the cadet movement. If your age is 11 to 18, it's a phenomenal movement. I had courses paid for and paid to go to sailing camps, different places all over the place, and probably a couple $1,000s that didn't come out of my pocket.
That sounds good. So that is it for us today. Thank you for coming in, Ryan.
Well, thank you, Baron. I appreciate it.
And it's interesting that when I asked you about your worst day, which was a completely ad-lib question, just popped in my head, that you would bring up Kingston, because our last two songs, the first one is Nautical Disaster by the Tragically Hip from
yes.
Kingston. And, of course, if you're doing a show about boats and water in Canada, you have to have The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by
yes,
Gordon Lightfoot. So we'll be finishing on that. Thank you for coming in once again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. If you would like to be on the show, please feel free to send me an email at baroncameron.shaw.ca, at shaw.ca. It'll be written down here somewhere, so you don't have to worry about me fucking it up. But that is it for us. We're off to the rigger for the jam now.
Yes, we are.
So Sunday nights at the Square Rigger Pub, West Vancouver. Bring your guitar, bring your fun, come down, bring your voice, bring whatever, bring money. But we'll leave it there. And we will wrap it up, as I said, with the Tragically Hip from Day for Night. This is Nautical Disaster, followed up by The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Thanks for listening.